From the point we last left off from, you can now skip the next 11 episodes and most of the filler, as nothing at all happens and they're really kind of terribly written.
Oh, sure, they have plots of the week, but none of them matter. None of them are character-focused or informative for the leads. All they do is serve as second banana to the guest stars that came in, are given the focus in the plot, often show themselves as more intelligent or central to defeating the monster of the week than the protagonists, and thus have to save them from their own ineptness.
I don't even find fun in any of them as I did, say, Black RX's ridiculous filler episodes, for it's the same beat over and over and over again with no variety, becoming downright boring. And I usually do not mind filler episodes between story arcs because they can provide insight into the setting and cast, alongside signs of whatever development the show attempts. But that doesn't happen here.
They do show other aspects of themselves, however. I came out of the show liking Mei the most out of the core 5, as she consistently showed herself as more than the stereotypical girl that Sentai Pink Rangers often become later down the line, and came across as more talented than the guys. But it's so little of that time and so much of it is superfluous, and leaves the Zyuranger as very bland and one-dimensional, something avoided in past shows. And it's caused by them being constantly shoved into the back seat for the guest stars so they can't be shown developing. For this is the problem with the kid plots of this show, and making a show stuffed with them. We don't care about them, and we are not made to care about them from how the episodes focused on them are structured and presented. We came here for the heroes the show is supposed to be about, and the adventures they have, and how it showcases or develops them into the best of themselves and a cohesive team. But if you subvert doing that, or alternatively show them as terrible people as later shows would do, then those that watch the show don't care about them either. But even when they are central to resolving an episode, it often feels as if any Zyuranger is interchangeable. Made worse by the general problem of child actors in the first place. They are by their very nature inexperienced and untrained. Thus, by making the story essentially be about them, you hinge all of a plot on their capability, or lack thereof. And often directors are not able to work well with them. The few times Mighty Morphin Power Rangers would have child actors on the show, most of them were overdubbed by the production team's voice actors, such as Wendy Lee and Brianne Siddall, as their performances could not be trusted and would just drag down the show, as such does here.
Hell, a number of these plots involving them, they're annoying as they feel as if they were not written with child actors in mind in the first place.
Notably the ones that have boys crushing on girls, as this is an impulse prepubescent children usually do not have, and others have them show such maturity you'd swear they were older than the Zyuranger. Some of the siblings could have been made to be farther apart in age to also possibly connect more broadly as well, and not showcase the older of two potential kids being given responsibilities far beyond their age. But everyone casted for such to my research was no older than 12. Though it could have been better if such were the same ones as a recurring secondary cast, such as what happened with certain Kamen Rider companions or Rider Scouts, as it gave them proper access to those means of storytelling without having to make up how they met these kids every single time.
They rarely bother with that.
If they had been extended main cast, their spotlight could also showcase their own development and growth into better people through the example of the heroes, like was seen with, say, Shigeru Sahara in Black RX, or even Masahiko Okamura in Amazon, who I still feel was one of the best child characters in Tokusatsu. But no, it's new ones that show up in each episode, meaning they spend more time with kids than doing something more constructive, such as training their capabilities to fight Bandora's forces, studying up any past tactics she was known for, or mythological creatures she could use. Get part-time jobs even to offset the living costs they all depend on Barza for.
Actually, that's an episode that occurs in the middle of the series, but its events are never spoken of again, which is part of the big problem with this show. It really fails to produce a setting where all of these things together are validated as they are not given the proper attention.
They just didn't care.
But wait, Des! This is a fantasy series! You can't bring real-world logic into this. It breaks the setting! You just hate all fantasy stories and silliness simply out of a hatred of fun.
My favorite fantasy book is Dragon the Lost Sea by Lawrence Yep. It is the tale of a dragon named Shimmer seeking to restore her lost home of the inland sea after a witch stole it. It is built around and focuses on this dragon and her interaction with an orphaned human boy that, through their travels, becomes her best friend, and in its sequels, sacrifices himself so she can achieve her dream.
It is a book that works due to the character interplay which syncs with their backstories and how Yep developed the setting and its rules to its ultimate culmination. All of which played off of real-world elements to ground it, as all of it started out by asking the question, what if an evil magic spirit had a good reason for what it was doing? And choosing to base the book's perspective from that of one of the spirit's victims, who over time would learn that everything that happened to her clan came from their own wrongdoing, and forgive her.
And it was originally aimed at the exact same demographic this show is. I read it when I was 9.
So no, I am not giving this show the kid gloves just because it's a fantasy series aimed at children, as I have seen fantasy series aimed at children, and other Sentai, that do all of these things and more to establish and progress their story, which this series rarely to never does. It wouldn't even be so frustrating, but the children's presence often leads to the showcasing of how incompetent the Zyuranger are, as the children are the ones that save the Zyuranger from the traps, plots, and foibles they stumble blindly into, with little justification for them to do so, and it happens in far excess to them saving themselves. For, as said, this is a series that runs off of Deus Ex Machina for its story resolutions.
Outsmarted by a child in short pants? No!
The following year, Zyuranger would have Code the Keeper Ranger. While he was a perverted brat shoved onto the main team by Shirakura, yes, he was the producer on Zyuranger as well, he did have a tangible character arc and relevance to the story that shows they could have done so here, possibly as someone helping them acclimate to the modern era.
Which leads me to my next general critique of wasted story potential. They instantly know everything about the modern era. They're written to know how to drive motorcycles, operate machinery, know the current currency and significant historical and pop culture references, and even societal nuances out of nowhere.
And yet they don't know these fantasy creatures they grew up with in their own time that they now end up facing, more often than not requiring they be looked up to learn anything about them.
It's a complete inconsistency to their given backstory and what we are shown happening to them over the series. That once they're in the modern times, they know all of this when they shouldn't. There is no period of adjustment, no culture shock, no bewilderment at modern technology and advancement and how things are different from their time millions of years ago. And no explanation how they are aware of or learned such, acting as if they were always part of this time and culture. Why even have them be ancient legendary heroes if it wasn't going to matter?
I can cite series from both inside and out of Toei that have dealt with such culture shock and people dealing with a different setting than the one they are used to or from. Amazon, Time Ranger, Gao Ranger, Abba Ranger, Goseiger, and Kyoryuger all do so to different degrees and effectiveness. Hell, the Fate series almost entirely runs off of this in bringing out-of-time combatants to fight over the Holy Grail, and does give an explanation for how they would know things or alternatively learn about the modern world.
And that's the insane franchise that has Rule 63 King Arthur fighting things on motorcycles, the Lion Man Thomas Edison, and Jailbait Jack the Ripper which manages it. We are not proud of Jailbait Jack the Ripper, she really needs some better clothes, Type Moon.
And once more, Noboru Sugimura ends up avoiding this problem with one of his other works, Onimusha Demon Siege, where two people from across time are put into the other's place, and they do address the culture shock from traveling through time.
It just appears he was not allowed to do anything to correct it here, and I've seen this crap pulled again in other Toei works that all have one thing in common to them.
少しは歴史を学べ。
And all of the writers on this show have done better both before and since this with establishing and relating their stories and these contexts. So you expect better of them even for a show that is targeted solely to the short bus in exclusion to all others. Toshiki Inoue, Naruhisa Arakawa, and Kenichi Araki had just come off of doing Jetman. Kyoko Sagayama was known for traumatizing people, especially children, with her work in the Metal Heroes series. And Susumu Takaku was a longtime franchise veteran dating back to Go Ranger. So there's more than enough talent amongst everyone to be able to do the job, but it's really not showing itself as playing to any of their strengths.
Though yes, I'll freely admit my dislike of fast and loose approaches to storytelling alongside a general disdain of writing down to an audience, when the genre generally avoids that. which hampers my appreciation of a show that is ultimately harmless in the grand scheme of things. I'm just saying that a lot of other series pulled what Zyuranger does for the exact same groups of people and done it better, or just straight up disregarded the demographic nonsense entirely like a lot of them do, which Zyuranger could easily have done had it mediated these points.
As Zyuranger initially was not well received from what I found, at least until they hit episode 17 where things began to turn around.
But so as to keep with my mandates of being an in-depth reviewer, let's just quickly recap the nuances to the filler that makes them differ, so we can get on to Burai.
Episode 7 has Dora Goblin steal the souls of children in order to eat them to fuel its own power. But for some reason, Shout Factory changed the translation of the word tamashi, meaning soul, to read as mind.
Not rated, includes fantasy violence and mild language.
The difficulty of this monster, and this is one of the few cases of the assistance from the child guest star being justified, is the monster can only be seen by kids. So they eventually trick it into switching its boots, which doesn't make sense as a weakness, to render it visible to their attacks. I don't think goblins are the fantasy creatures to have that power in the first place, come to think of it, and the show does this for pretty much all of the Western-sourced monsters they use. Episode 8 is making fun of fat people.
Please, I'd kill to be that thin. They're just wearing bulky clothing.
But it's made more clear in how Bandora tortures the overweight kid and his family by having Dora Cersei use extreme speed to steal everything they try to eat. The Zyuranger are tipped off to it with video footage they have legitimately no way of obtaining, and in battle, all of their weapons are eaten. They learn its weakness is some type of unspecified herb it's poisoned by, allergic to... Well, either way, it's rare, and happens to be held by the Fae character Gnome, who is not a gnome, who challenges them to get it from him by winning an eating contest. What? It's an amazingly easy challenge, to the point I'm surprised he didn't just give it to them. Though everything stalls out when it's revealed Boy is terrified of carrots.
But I haven't even summoned the World Carrot Weight Champion yet to make this comparable to the Tomato Man with Raita from last season. This is a thing that exists.
While he eats it, they get the herb and trick him into eating it. They recover the weapons and kill it, thus allowing the family to eat again after having lost 10 pounds. Episode 9 and 10 is a two-parter involving the Zyuranger's first attempt to recover a set of dino eggs.
Well, I can tell you right now, they're scattered around Reefside.
However, this one most highlights my issue with the kid plots, in that the one that becomes involved does so literally out of nowhere, and everyone instantly coming out of nowhere to crowd into their house, not even a minute after members of the tribe that found them crash into their house. And the resultant kidnapping is the only reason this isn't a single-part episode, as it pads it out. Had it been focused on this tribe of monkey-tailed humans and their tale of how they were cursed by the gods...
This is incidentally also showing the first evidence of how dickish the guardian beasts are.
That would honestly make it feel more like periodic lore building, but that is solely an afterthought. Irksome, since their cursing was caused by them failing to protect the fruit of the gods, and thus they were cast out of the forest they were previously attending.
Oh great, so it's their fault the world was almost consumed by the Helheim forest and its infests. I'm running with this.
Hell, Bandora only succeeds in stealing the eggs by her monster, Cockatrice, which of course is in no way relates to the myth of the cockatrice because why would it, disguising itself as the shoehorned-in girl and tricking the child prince of the tribe into removing its protections, and it's only due to the sides fighting that they're in turn lost to the sea.
It seems like a plot-central episode, but since the eggs were thrown into the sea in the first place, and they pulled this stunt with them again later, while also revealing why they were sent like that as well, and why the later repetition, since they didn't set it up correctly in this one, it leaves these episodes as completely superfluous.
In episode 11, Totpat's fishing from the moon. When his line happens to catch onto a genie's lamp. Well, Totpat ends up losing the genie, whose name is Djinn, which is spelled as Gene, which is presented as both Gene and Geen in Shout Factory subs, to a group of kids who make like the kid in Kazam and wish for everything they could ever want. This one is one of the more notorious points of friction between Shirakura and Sugimura. Sugimura wanting to showcase some form of cost to these wishes and how they don't give you what you really want, while Shirakura wanted nothing of the sort. The consequences for your actions should not matter ever, and pulled rank.
This explains so much about Heisei Kamen Rider under him.
Bandora, however, breaks the lamp, the need for one leaving him with no hope of resisting her order, when she makes a replacement for him, and it's only by mending the broken one that he's freed and sent back into the ocean to be lost to both sides.
And like when they did that with the eggs, Bandora has scrying magic she could use right after they're lost with which to retrieve them before they move too far out to sea.
Episode 12 also has Totpat try to drink the blood of people because he's a vampire?
You are a monkey! Monkey! Monkey!
But ends up being thwarted, not by the Zyuranger, but a little girl, whose antics are all in order to force her father, a policeman she views as a wimp, to man up and be a hero.
And now, footage of a police officer being a hero. Yeah, I don't think she really understands what she wants.
Bandora's gang used this collection of eyeballs to hypnotize her to see Totpat's antics actually being committed by her father, which is where the Zyuranger come in.
You had vampires 170 million years in the past?
Well then, Bandora tries to reyouthen herself by using Dora Radon to turn children into apples, trying to create her own artificial gold fruit of longevity. But actually ends up pulling the Snow White gambit by taking out May, since she's the only one of the warriors with the ability to defeat Radon, as they need to snipe its head apples with a special arrow. I admit, I kind of appreciate this one, simply because Bandora's being pretty smart with the plan. It's too bad Deus Ex Machina leads to May's abrupt recovery and ruins such. Curses! Then an elf named Dadan tries to intern under Plepicron as a sculptor, but is rejected, falling into collusion with the boy that is unjustifiably berated by the adults around him as an awful person, who ends up helping him capture things in bottles to be used as models in the elf's sculpting, but of course capturing the people inside those objects by accident. No wonder adults were berating the kid.
You might actually recognize this kid from when this episode was adapted for Power Rangers, as the fight scene they had to use for this wasn't well edited, thus he was visible in that fight footage.
As Bandora then enlarges the pair so they could continue their havoc, and he is heavily present in that footage. Mighty Morphin Season 1 had a lot of problems, but this one can be accredited as simple inexperience. Episode 15 has Bandora kidnap a child to be used in a ritual, so as to drag from out of hell the demonic sword Durandal for Dora Knight.
Except Durandal's a holy sword, wielded by paladins. It wouldn't be in hell.
The weapon, however, causes all other weapons it touches to rust, but because of the ritual, it can't harm the one used to summon it. Thus, by placing the boy Bandora used in Daijujin, the protection spreads to the mech, and they kill the knight. In episode 16, Boy cooks for the cast, who find it inedible.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. I was preparing to use something that is an essential life skill taught to me by my father.
And I don't see any of you stepping in to bother teaching him not to suck at it. Dear God, this is such a Japanese trope. This leads to him encountering the brat of the episode, who gets kicked off his soccer team for breaking the rules, which Boy doesn't see that part of, but does see him fall into collusion with the most evil of evils. A clown! It gives birth to golden soccer balls, which when kicked release a paralytic sneezing powder. Hey, why not a paralytic instead? And they are kicked into their targets by the brat. Kind of seems like a useless means of including him, but whatever. This is in turn a showcasing of the Zyuranger's incompetence, as Boy lets the clown produce his toxic soccer balls in a sequence shot so long that he could have easily stopped the first one's production, let alone all of the others. However, I take even more issue with its weakness. Boy falls in a river and struggles to not drown. Only after he's rescued by the brat, having an inexplicable change of heart, does he stop sneezing. He thus determines the sneezing powder is counteracted by water, but with how he almost drowned because he could not stop sneezing while in the water, that cannot be presented as the way to stop it, as otherwise he would have stopped sneezing the second he fell into the water and had his head submerged to remove all of it from him. Well, whatever. They drowned in turn to deal with it.
And thus, we now reach what most people know this series as bringing us, which is probably the sole reason for its turnaround. The first official Sixth Ranger.
And unfortunately, it was introduced simply as a marketing gimmick to fix the show's lagging reception. While it was doing good with younger audiences, actually far younger than they even intended to show how far off the mark they were with this, the lack of anything special was leaving the attention to it fleeting. And as said, older demographics the show had relied on for years felt alienated to it outright because the show was intentionally exclusionary towards them. This, however, was the olive branch intended to correct that. As Bandura is given a vision of a way to counteract the Zyuranger, a boy named Ryota recovers a hidden green creed from a hidden box, only for his grandfather, the previously met gnome, to try and stop him with a forklift.
Crap. This is probably the easiest joke possible to make with this situation, but I know my contemporaries have already made it. Alright, screw it.
Frozen in time, let's get set for action. With a young boy and a green key, he tried to kill him with a forklift. Run away! The Zyuranger are of course useless in this situation as they come into it lacking any context, despite Barza joining in to help stop Ryota, nor are they ever told what's going on until it's far too late, ending up in the meantime thinking Ryota's actions are in the right, and Nomen Barza, who by this point they should know have good reasons for doing what they do, are just overreacting, even though they're trying to kill him!
Hell, Ryota should know better than to impulsively do this, solely banking on memories of the Sixth Warrior's kindness, despite the brat being over 170 million years old like everyone else, so should have the life experience to actually have matured, and thus been told by Nomen Barza why this is a bad idea.
But Ryota believes Burai can do what the others can't, defeat Bandura. Mainly as, come on, they have had the worst track record thus far. And that Bandura is facilitating this should also be a big warning flag. Eventually Ryota succeeds, revealing... And then suddenly... I'm taking over as the star now! He then proceeds to kick 5 types of ass, thanks to the fantastic suited stunt acting of Seiji, Mr. Kamen Rider Takaiwa.
ごめんよ、おじいちゃん。僕が扉を開けたばっかりに。
亮太君、君が悪いんじゃない。いつかはこうなる運命だったんじゃ。
Yes, it was, and no, it wasn't. The episode says they could only lock him on June 19th, the day he sealed himself in there to follow the Zyuranger to the present. Had the day passed, he would have been stuck in there another year.
Geki gets fed up with all of this, and we finally get backstory! Except it's solely about Burai and Geki. See, the pair are actually brothers.
You must admit this would be impossible to fake.
The king of Geki's tribe, the Yamato, didn't have an heir, so took Geki from his real family.
子供に恵まれなかった大和国王があの戦いで俺は王である父も母も失った。そして10歳になる妹も。
His real dad thus started a rebellion against the king, one that failed, Burai having to witness his death.
ブライ、わしの敵を取ってくれ。
Subvert the protagonist and become Sasuke Uchiha! Take from him his story!
This does not, however, explain the showcased hatred for Geki or the Zyuranger. They are not the ones that did this to him, nor is it the fault of the guardian beasts they serve. His brother is innocent of these crimes and unknowingly a victim of kidnapping. I take that perspective, since this is so ambiguously told, their dad's real reason for rebelling could have easily been to get his son back, and that being the task he charged Burai with. Hell, expanded to going through hardship as he grew up, leading to this disdain and target being distorted by the realization Geki didn't suffer like he did. He had it easy, thus making him lose sight of his original task in a more Sith-like beginning.
Because unfortunately, outside of words spoken while he's cursed with insanity following this, thus cannot really be trusted as his real feelings, all we really get for such is empty egotistical pride.
Still, this backstory gives Burai more agency than pretty much all of the Zyuranger combined.
Also, Burai is played by Shiro Izumi, a Sentai veteran who previously played Yuma Ozora, changed Pegasus in Changeman. I would recommend possibly checking him out there, but sadly Changeman is one of those Showa Sentai series that does not have a complete translation yet. And you really didn't do anything. Oh, yeah, Bandora does this every now and then when their episodes run short. It's not like you could use it for something like, say, character development.
Still, Bandora has a gift for Burai to aid him in his quest. The Demon Sword Helfried.
Mistranslation. Greatest Sword of Evil. The biggest Sword of Evil remains the Soul Edge.
Two things. 1. Why not just give him the cursed sword from the Legendary Weapons Shrine? 2. Why not introduce this thing instead of improperly using Durandal a few episodes ago? Well, no matter. This thing is forced on him and now drives him insane and evil.
Which also serves as another narrative disconnect. Barza knew about Burai and his backstory, but it's not until now that he's actually evil and a threat to them to warrant the urgency to stop his awakening. He doesn't know about Burai's other issue. So before this, had they chosen to awaken him properly, they could have possibly talked it out. Or maybe you should have written that he was cursed with this megalomaniacal insanity before he was sealed away. Because without this twist, they're effectively fighting for no reason.
Oh, son of a bitch! Still, this ultimately results in a rushed and far weaker reiteration of the dynamic and story of Kotaro and Nobuhiko from Black. A comparison I only make because Noboru Sugimura was responsible for such and its inevitable tragedy. But this is where Daijujin, having combined himself without any of the Zyuranger, comes by to save Geki and tells him to kill Burai in the name of justice.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Yeah, God is a dick.
As there is no justice to be found in punishing a victim of others' crimes. And yeah, because this cursed sword was forced upon him, even now that applies to Burai. Bandora awakens another of her group, Lammy, based off of Lamia, which Shout Factory is romanized with a Y instead of an I, who is tasked with once more trying to recover the dinosaur eggs as they've been rediscovered. First time it took millions of years, this time just a few weeks. Well, she first manifests as a boulder that chases the brats down. Griforzer comes to assist her upon her reveal, in turn revealing, the two are married!
That must have been a match made off of ancient eHarmony, since Griforzer can't speak.
Well, they succeed in taking one of the brats as a hostage, bartering his safety in exchange for the eggs, which the Zyuranger just straight up do. Not even trying to pull a fast one by attempting to craft fake egg constructs so they can save the kid and keep the eggs, as would have been done by other teams. But then again, these guys are not smart, worrying over the other sibling who was injured in the attack but not in critical condition, over someone who is in active danger. and with no plan other than the one that will put the unborn dinosaurs in massive danger by someone who absolutely despises them.
And this is made even more foolish by a later retcon that reveals that if all of the dinosaurs die out, if Pandora breaks these eggs, then since the guardian beasts are dinosaur gods, they too will die out and disappear in a puff of logic. Meaning, in this very moment, since she knows this information, she has effectively achieved her absolute win condition. And she doesn't use it!
And this is because of the haphazard way this series presents its stories. Things that happened before now don't matter, because it's not part of the current tale. They can be disregarded as they are now focused on this current drama, even when this current drama won't hold up against the coming drama later down the line, which ends up informing something wrong that happened in prior events due to this new information.
This is why I'm beginning to feel I owe an apology to both Toshiki Inoue and Shoji Onomura for what I've said about them in past videos, because this no longer seems like something endemic to their writing, but who is above them on the totem pole? As this is the same damn complaint I have to the Tyson movies, writer reboot films, and Amazons. They still wrote horrible content, yeah, so I'm not fully committed to that, but I feel a bit more bad about lambasting them.
And if you think I'm being overcritical of this, and I admit I may be, well, she then uses them as part of a plot to take down Daizujin permanently, waiting until a solar eclipse happens, as the guardian beasts are suddenly revealed to be solar-powered despite them working absolutely fine in other night and dark environments, to weaken and kill them. But she uses the eggs as hostages in a scheme to make Zyuranger call out the mechs to save them, instead of outright breaking them to do this, thus making her actions overconvoluted and unnecessary when she had the means to destroy them right there.
Granted, in the perspective of someone being spiteful and wanting vengeance on the entities that cost her her son, I can get her wanting her pound of flesh, so to speak, thus ordering this elaborate and cathartic beatdown. She just never actually finishes them off. Either way, even when Pandora's winning, she's missing enormous opportunities to actually subvert and defeat her enemies. The Crisis Empire was better at this!
At least during this, we get some good time with the villains, Lammy and Grifforzer celebrating their reunion, and Pandora granting Grifforzer the ability to speak. Though that in itself results in its own problems.
Can this marriage be saved?
But yeah, this is just another in a recent chain of total defeats for the Zyuranger, the dinosaur eggs also being lost again over this turn of events. After all, the show turned off God mode, and they've only won due to invoking it. But as the five mourn the loss of the gods, Burai in his insanity attacks Pandora, being cast down from the heavens to be taken in by...
Wow, the Ku Klux Klan is recruiting young these days.
Well, Burai is dragged off into a sealed chamber called the Lapseless Room, a room where time stands still.
No, not like that. And only one of them stops time.
The reason being that Burai is, well...
Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead.
It turns out during his time in stasis, the chamber he was using was disrupted, resulting in Rock's fall. Burai dies.
This is not told in this episode. This was added onto the series later to justify this plot point as an afterthought explanation.
The reason he's even still walking around, however, is the spirit was asked by Daizujin to revive him in the short term, so he could eventually come to help the Zyuranger if needed.
Again, a later retcon to explain how he's even alive, which is contradicted by earlier material. Moreover, if Daizujin is the only reason Burai is even alive right now, then why was he telling Geki to kill him?
This spirit, by the way, is Clotho, the spirit of life.
No. Clotho is the Keymaster.
But also, why didn't Clotho or the gods fully restore Burai's life if they actually were going to need him in this conflict at some point? As we are later shown, they had a means by which to do so, which is only rendered unusable by the way in which Burai was originally Deus Ex Machina back from the dead. Which again reiterates my point from earlier of, if they can revive the dead, why didn't they just make a deal with Pandora to give her son back to end the conflict if such was an option?
It just raises too many questions.
Of course, since none of this has been told to Burai, he thinks Clotho is straight up lying to him. But stupidly, he is also now given his proper legendary weapon, the Zusoken, which can teleport him in and out of the Lapsus room, and by playing the flute on it, he can summon Mechagodzilla!
I think the more Trumpet-esque reversion of this in Power Rangers sounds better. It's just me.
We are going to need bigger guns.
But yes, his personal guardian beast, Dragon Caesar, is based off of Mechagodzilla, and by proxy, any iteration of Godzilla. The production team has straight up admitted this on multiple occasions, and this is clearly homage in how in its first appearance, he follows Godzilla tradition and proceeds to rampage through Tokyo's industrial district, just as the original did the first time he made landfall in Tokyo.
And this is because Clotho gave him the Zuzoken while he was still cursed with insanity by Helfried.
I mean, it's not like they're actually presenting him as being afflicted with madness at this point. They pretty much dropped any and all pretense of that in his characterization the episode after he got the sword that causes that condition. But it's a plot point we as viewers still remember as an explanation for his actions. A plot point not even the show seems to remember at this point, for as the Zyuranger help the injured, they come to the conclusion they must stop Burai. Not the curse causing this, but the man himself, all in the name of justice.
Because justice stays crunchy in milk.
Of course, instead of doing the smart thing and forcing him off the mech, they draw attention to themselves, which results in them being fired upon. Hell, Grifforzer and Lammy do more to try and stop Dragon Caesar than they do. Yeah, they're pretty much useless without the power of Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina no Jutsu! Yeah, they revive out of nowhere as toys.
Get used to that, by the way. Zyuranger had frequent budget issues, usually because that budget was being allocated to entirely superfluous content or focused around the excess of action scenes over, cheaper scenes of character moments and development. Thus, half the time they needed the Guardian Beasts in some form in an episode, they either recut old stock footage or used the toys in place of the various props.
This is not the only instance of this. A lot of the scenes as the show moves on becoming more recycling of stock footage. But yeah, the Guardian Beasts get Dragon Caesar under control, allowing Geki, just Geki, to try and fight Burai, even though they'd already established that Burai can kick all five's asses at the same time, and the Zyuranger have not trained or improved themselves in any way with which to overcome Burai. Naturally, Burai only loses because of a chance blow, which turns the tables.
Not rated, includes fantasy violence and mild language.
Daijujin assembles and once more tells Geki to murder his brother, which Geki refuses to, again. But instead of destroying the sword that's continuing this madness, he turns his back on Burai, which allows Burai to attack him, only to be stalled by really, really shallow words that should not in any way have caused Burai to both stop and surrender, let alone collapse in grief over his actions. Though the latter could more come from the sword's curse leaving it and regretting his actions while under its power, it's not exactly presented as that. Still, Burai's welcome to the team, not really, and with Dragon Caesar amongst them, he can now combine with the mechs into this new, alternative combination! Which also served to be Sentai's first alternative combination secondary mech, as opposed to a secondary two-piece mech, or any secondary mech that combines with the main mecha. But as he returns to the lapseless room, Clotho finally tells him why he needs to be there. But again, not the how to it, which should really explain the necessity of it, nor the monitoring of this green candle to tell how long he has left.
Despite a lot of the logical hiccups, the Burai arc really is where Zyuranger picks up.
I'm going to have more to say about it in the next video, I'm running long as it is, But skipping from episode 6 to episode 17 really is preferable, as it excises a fair chunk of the annoying content of the show, and as none of it matters in the grand scheme, you are overall left with a better impression of it. At least in my opinion. As I've said, there are a ton of narrative hiccups, and the disregard to its own plot points is frustrating, but during my original watch years ago, I had already lowered my expectations immensely that these episodes were something of a breath of fresh air.
Next time, however, we'll be seeing how they once more didn't take advantage of this new, fantastic thing for Sentai! And the main problem really has to do with leaving Burai with that countdown to death.